I'm Jake Aaron Villarreal, born and raised in Silicon Valley, and here to take you behind the scenes to share what it's like to be a startup founder, the journey they're on, the problems they face, the products they build as they transform industries. I'm excited to have with us today Zhamak Dehghani, founder and CEO of Next Data. Zhamak, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. I know we spent a little time trying to get the schedules connected, and now we're finally able to talk. And for the listeners, I guess before we dive in here, I'll give a little background of yourself. Zhamak is not just the founder, but also the CEO that leads Next Data. She is the author of Data Mesh and co-author of Architecture: The Hard Parts, an O'Reilly book. Um, Shamak, you have 25 years of experience in technology. You've contributed to multiple patents in distributed computing communications, and you are a startup founder leading as a solo founder of the company. Where are you joining us from today?
Bay Area, north of San Francisco, Marin County in the Bay Area, California.
Hundreds of AI startups are launching every month, battling to build their founding teams. As a leader, your job is to get results. When it comes to hiring, that's where it gets tough. So you go out and you try a recruitment firm, but they don't understand your story. They're off target, and when they send you candidates, it's a waste of time. We believe you should never have your time wasted. That's why we launched Match Relevant, because your story is more than just an open role. It's your founder's journey, the problem you're solving, the product you're building, and why it matters. When we work with companies, we make sure we understand your whole story. So when we go out and do a search, we're on target. It's worth their time. They're interested. And more importantly, it's worth yours. And when it comes to hiring engineers, we work to make sure we get it right by deploying a team of seasoned CTOs that have built some of Silicon Valley's best companies. They can collaborate with you in the technical interviewing process. They can be a sounding board, or they can run it for you. When it comes to building teams, there's no time to waste. Let's make it count. If you have a role that needs to be filled, book a time with a hiring guide at matchrelevant.com and learn how we do it. God, I love that area. It's such a great place to be. And I'm sure there's a lot of innovation friends that you have in the general area. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Iran. I'm from Tehran, which is kind of north center of Iran, just near beautiful kind of mountains, high altitude mountains. So yeah, that's where I'm from.
Very cool. And give us a little background of you as really prior to school, just as a kid growing up. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs have that model they look at in their parents that they're also entrepreneurs, or you have something you shoot for that's typically around people you know. But what kind of got you into the mindset of at some point being a founder? What was your DNA like growing up?
Right. Yeah. My parents were kind of entrepreneurs, founders in different fields. My dad was an engineer. My mom was a teacher, turned into open her business, daycares and so on. So I grew up with family who had their businesses. They loved their businesses. My dad was a geek. They loved creating things and building things. So that was kind of the role models that I had in life. And then a lot of us find ourselves in a completely different trajectory by just curiosity met serendipitous encounters, right? You get introduced to something that you hadn't seen before, and that blows your mind and opens up, your imagination. I lived in Iran at a strange time. I was about 7 years old when revolution happened, and followed by war, followed by sanctions. So in an environment that you're constrained from resources and access to the world outside the country, pretty much. My dad happened to bring a Commodore 64 when I was a teenager. Now I'm giving my age away. From UK on one of his business trips, and with that computer came two basics programming books. And on one of those books, there was a computer with a smiley face hanging out a coffee mug. And I thought, wow, computers can make you coffee, and handing out coffee mugs. And, as a kid, you just like light up. And it was the computers weren't accessible back in schools back then. Even, I don't know, even if in US they were, but yeah, so that kind of made me curious about learning more about programming and computers, and that put me on the trajectory of I want to be a software engineer, I want to be a computer engineer. So then I went on, did my undergrad degree as a software engineer, and again, for as a person who lived under a suppressive regime, you very much, crave and love freedom in any way. So that sense of autonomy as, kind of freedom was something that I was always craving for, and I think it has influenced my work even later in life. So, in the search of freedom, I left the country and went to Australia and did my master's there in mixing, again, opening the horizon, mixing management and computing, and worked in R&D at all levels of kind of, I guess, stack. I worked at the firmware level, building micro embedded devices. Then I worked at distributed systems, monitoring recovery of infrastructure before cloud, before when people were hosting their own systems, I need to monitor them and recover them. Yeah, and then I shifted from R&D and product to kind of consulting again. I was curious again, and I came across a group of wonderful people at ThoughtWorks. They were the thought leaders behind, continuous delivery, agile manifesto, microservices. So again, I got curious about that, and at some point, I found myself in a universe that didn't make sense, and I had to make sense out of it, and that was the data world and data management world. And again, that encounter with this bizarre world of data management that I couldn't decode because it didn't make sense to me, that led me on the path of coming up with new ideas, new concepts. Data mesh, I introduced the concept of data mesh, data products that now become synonymous with data strategy and data. Yeah, and then the journey continued from there. I'm happy to continue the journey, but I can pause, take a breath, and then see where to go next.
Yeah. Well, the whole world seems like it's all about data today. And you've got companies that are building all sorts of different tools to manage your data, to make sure that you're getting the value out of your data. If you're a big company that's got, years of information, you have multiple departments, you have all sorts of people that are leading. They want to get information that can turn into value for their own company. Um, but when you talk about data management and you talk about this concept of data mesh, for the listeners that aren't necessarily data experts, kind of take a step back and what was the landscape like that you saw, and where did data mesh, the idea, come from?
Sure. Um, Great way of asking the question. I think the landscape that existed is the universe that I said it didn't make sense to me, was the existing landscape, which was really built based on top of a hack and based on an assumption that needed to be challenged. So what that was that, in the operational world, you have self-contained autonomous applications. I mean, from the early days of building Unix, and Unix philosophy has been all around building things that do one thing and do really well and play nicely with the rest of applications around them. And that philosophy had led to, well, applications have their own separate databases, they have APIs in front of them for interacting with them and interconnecting them to create higher order value or applications. That's great. On the data side, whether you are doing traditional analysis or analytics or AI, ML, anything in between, the world looked different. The assumption was you've got to get all the data out of these databases, collect them, centralize them, and then layer them with kind of semantic and catalog for understanding and security and so on. And then at the end, the analyst can get or the data scientist can get the value. And in between, we have to build pipelines. So this notion of data motion and moving data around and moving it around from one place to another and collecting it and giving access to everyone and layering it with some sort of a view into that lake or that warehouse was kind of the foundational assumption or the operating model of data management. And today, if you look at kind of different technologies, they are supporting that operating model. The challenge with that operating model is that it actually doesn't scale when organizations grow, where the sources of data proliferate across a wide landscape within or across organization. It doesn't actually work when use cases kind of can be anywhere, like you have the diversity of use cases, because in the middle of it you've got this idea of the pipeline and you've got this idea of centralization that is a bottleneck there. And one thing breaks upstream, you don't know what broke, things just fall apart downstream. It's just fundamentally is not a scalable concept. It doesn't have abstraction like the beautiful services with abstracted APIs. Just that doesn't exist in the data world. So my challenge was, and my influence, where the idea of the micro data mesh came from, really adapting what I had experienced and seen work in the operational world, where you have small services, they contain all the pieces they need to do their job. There's nothing else outside, it's just a service and you run it on your infrastructure. And they have clear encapsulation and boundaries and clear interfaces for the job to be serviced to the other people. So I kind of adapted that to the world of data. And what I came up with was this idea of decentralized ownership and management of data sent soup to nuts. So, how can we decouple this kind of monolith and bottleneck by allowing different teams to manage soup to nuts all their elements of data, their data supply chain, to provide that signal that they're receiving by, let's say, you're an application interacting with the user, or the signal that you're receiving because you're selling product on somebody else's website, like that, to capture those signals and provide those signals now as data that can be directly used for analytics and AI training. And it's not just the data, because you need to also provide the context about the data. The metadata describes it. You need to make this whole data supply chain as a package kind of manageable so that it can run on different infrastructure. So the idea was really decentralized ownership of data management as a foundational piece. But to make that possible, then I had to introduce new concept. I had to introduce the concept of data product, data as a product, this data supply chain as an application, as a product. With interconnectivity, of course, in between. I had to introduce the idea of computational governance, as in how can we make these independently managed data products governable, standardized, so that your security people can sleep at night, or governance people can sleep at night, that the privacy is not being compromised or security is not compromised. The third idea was, okay, how can we actually, this is a very nice idea, but how can we make it real? Like, how can we ask the marketing department to manage their marketing data? Um, like, how is that like possible, right? There's a reason there is a centralized team, because they have the skills. So that meant we had to level up the data infrastructure, the interface of data producers, data users, to the infrastructure in a way that a not super technical person can still manage and own the data. Well, we could start with at least technologists, the people that understand technology, right? So anyhow, that there is a lot need to come in, but fundamentally the principle was decentralization and simplification of data management, in a way that we can create value at scale and at speed as your organizations grow, as the new use cases arrive. We don't have a bottleneck.
Yeah, that's great. I took kind of the idea of data mesh and actually put it into ChatGPT and just said, explain this to a 5-year-old. And actually, it was fantastic what it came up with. But it was essentially taking a look at a kid or a child being in a house, and each room had its own set of blocks or toys. And it was to keep each room organized so that every room you went into, it had its own toys that worked together, which were, I'm assuming, data, and it was all easy to play with and then put back together when you left to go into the next room. So
Oh, I
that
love
was
it.
how it was explained to me. Data can be complex, and there's so many different tools out there that you have to pay for, that you have to license, that you have to use, you have to train to get people up to speed on. Talk a little bit about your company.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration behind Next Data, knowing that you've already had these fundamental ideas around data management and supply chain of the data? What was the idea that you said, you know what, I think there's an opportunity to bring this product to market? And then
Yeah.
what problem is that solving now?
Great question. Yes, so I think the maybe there was more emotion behind starting the Next Data than idea. It was an emotion of like frustration and anger and hope to be lost that started it. But when you think about um, kind of the problem that existed was the gap between the concept and implementation. So the concept existed as a set of principles, but to implement that concept, the technology that you had at your disposal or have at your disposal are too low level. You have the pieces of it. You have compute to when you think about what I mean by data supply chain is that you receiving data from somewhere. So there's mechanisms by which you ingest data, you process that data, so it's some form of transformation. You produce that data in multiple forms so that it can be consumed by a variety of users. There's a whole set of capabilities that need to come together so that kid in that room has the right building blocks to build their own data products. And right now, those building blocks were like too low level and they're suitable for the parents. I don't know if you remember, actually, now I'm going to go with your kid story. Do you remember the little bits? I think they were called little bits.
Yeah.
There were pieces of electronics built for kids that you can connect them together. It's now probably 10 years old or more, and they could build new circuits that do something like play sound or blow air or something.
Right. Yeah.
So you imagine that if that kid was given just wires and a circuit board and a bunch of like transistors and so on, they wouldn't be able to create a toy with it, right? You press a button and it plays a sound. That's too low level. And that's the technology we had at our disposal. So for these teams to be able to own their data management end to end in a decentralized way and yet connect them, we had to introduce new blocks, like the little bits of the data stack. So the idea behind the company was, okay, if we were going to introduce some of the similar to the revolution we saw with microservices or digitalization at scale, if you look behind it, or cloud native kind of applications, one of the main components that made that possible was kind of Docker and Kubernetes. What they did was they containerized and standardized how applications are built, managed, deployed, observed on a variety of different infrastructure. They managed to hide the networking differences. They managed and hide the different CPUs and different storage and so on behind a very simple interface. So that was the initial kind of genesis or nexus of the system that we're building. We said, if we wanted to containerize your data stack so that kid can get a little container that has a few buttons they can press and it does things for them without really knowing all that in what would that look like. So initial the core invention behind the company is this idea of the data product containers. So they containerize that complexity of soup to nuts of data supply chain, from storage, from running transformation, from serving data, from metadata, managing and orchestrating and still relying on existing any storage, any compute, any type of access. So that containerization of data stack is one, so that you have the right building blocks, so you have the right Lego parts. And then on top of it, we have the operating system, which allows you to connect these Lego bits together. So the operating system would allow a simple experience for the data developers to build their own data products, to use this Lego box to build the kind of data products that are now sharing data, or for the data user to now discover the Lego parts that are available to them to connect and build, bigger analysis, new machine learning models. So we build the discovery experience, the build experience, and the management experience, on top of really, this data product, containers that we have. So you can imagine it as, Kubernetes plus Docker of the big data kind of data ecosystem.
Yeah, that's great. Well explained. So technically, you do need people that are in a department that understand the technology and how to work with the platform that you're giving them, plus the users that are going to use the platform so they can actually see the value in the data. Um, as you look at the market, I mean, I think for any company that's got a lot of data, it could be a useful platform. But with AI coming from the ground up in almost every sector, it's really all about data and being able to make good use of what that data looks like. Where do you fit in the sort of the AI sector, if you will?
Sure. I think, the what AI sector has done, or let's say the Gen AI, recent Gen AI movement has done, has actually shown and demonstrated in large organizations that the data management strategies that they have, it just doesn't work. It doesn't scale. It has created a pressure point on that monolithic approach that it's really got it to a breaking point. Because if you think about the existing model, is you have a big data platform team, they own a data platform. You probably have five of those in a large organization. It's not actually single. Every business unit has its own. And you've got on one side of that data platform, you have a lot of different sources of data. And on the other side, you have a lot of use cases. What GenAI has done has 10xed the input, because now you have unstructured data that nobody knew how to use it. Now that there is a LLM on the other side that knows how to use it, if you can expose it as a product that is governable, discoverable, standardized. So it has created a pressure point on the input into the system of data management as a whole. It had created pressure point on the output of data management as a whole, because now you not only have to support data in its tabular format for your dashboards, or in your file formats for your traditional ML. Now you have to vectorize your data for your, RAG flows and a new use cases for that data. So that system is falling apart. So what we're seeing is, the problem that I pointed out and say doesn't really work, and a lot of large organizations already were feeling the pain. They're feeling the pain further, even more acutely, because what's happening is that skunk work projects that can experiment with Gen AI are appearing everywhere in the organization, and none of them are connected to a platform that can serve them rapidly, can really serve now a new type of data and a new mode of access to data. And I think that was fundamentally baked into our container strategy, because our containers, you can have many of those, so you're not actually, constrained to a big data platform. The whole idea was decentralizing, so it can scale. So if you have a skunk project, instead of having a skunk project, you could have had a legitimate project of building new types of data products from unstructured data to vectorized data, or extending your existing containers to now produce the same data in a new mode, which we always support. So I think for us, the application of this decentralization is becoming even more relevant. And I think this codification of abstraction of data and compute in this concept of a data product that serves data natively in different modes, becomes more relevant. So I think for us, it's not that we had to, invent a new technology. It was baked into the original design. How it affected us further was that now there are also tons of opportunities for us, for a platform provider, to also apply Gen AI capabilities and infuse them in, like anybody else is doing, right? So every application that is generated, probably created from, 2 years ago back, the expectation is that that magic of generative technologies are baked in. And for us, is we're no exception. We have some of those, kind of touches of magic that generative technologies bring to the users of our technology.
Yeah, that's really great. Um, Give us a use case. You come in, you hear a problem with data in a company, and they bring you in. Who are you talking to? Who are you selling to within the company? And
Yeah.
what are you leaving with them that they can walk away and implement, and now they're up and running and they're doing something that they weren't doing before much easier, maybe more cost effectively. What Walk us through that.
It's a long story, but like all the other stories, I guess it's a long one. And the person that has the biggest pain point is the buyer. He or she is really in charge of the data platform or data infrastructure, data transformation sometime, um, either at the level of the organization or the type of organizations we talk to. They're also almost Fortune 500 multi-billion dollar organizations, so it's at the level of a business unit within that organization, which is itself is a multi-billion dollar business. So often these folks are, that they care about efficiency of data production and data usage, data innovation. Bottom line, data innovation. They have business KPIs that directly hangs on how effectively they can innovate and tap into the data that they already have or they're purchasing, they're bringing into the organization. And that person is often like the head of data or head of data transformation, either within a business unit or at the organizational level. They're close enough to the technology, or they have people that are, they're close enough to technology to be able to make a decision around the purchase of a technical solution. At the end of the day, we are technology, we are a product. The pain points they often have is what I just described. Like they come to us because data mesh resonated with them, and they come to the creators to, or data products resonated with them, and they come to us. The pain point is, look, we spend a ton of money. We have all the big pieces. We've got, the big data warehouse, data lake, data catalog, but there is still, it takes so much time, or it costs us so much money to to build new use cases on top of our data. The use cases could be Gen AI use cases, could be AI use cases, could be plain old visibility to the analytics and insights. It takes us too long. It's costing us too much. We don't know what we have and we don't have. And the things we have, we don't know who's actually using it. But we don't even know what's the ROI on an investment. Like, all of this is broken, right? It's just we're not moving fast enough, and it's costing us so much. And as a data platform team, we're dealing with a bunch of angry people that want the data and they can't get to it. And we don't know what we have and we don't have. So that's kind of the general vibe of, and often they have drunk the Kool-Aid of data mesh. So they've started some in-house, maybe with consultants, maybe with some ancillary products, and spend a bunch of money, and they have to show results, and they're struggling to show results. So that's kind of the situation where we enter. What we leave them with is the first phase of our engagement often is a pilot that I got a text from one of these folks who was the head of data for a large CPG company, was at the end of that pilot was, thank you for showing us a path that we didn't even know existed before. And that path means we show them how they can reimagine and reconfigure the whole data management around this data product creation. We can show them how quickly they can bootstrap these data product containers from the existing assets they have. And by just the virtue of creating a container, everything else will come out of the box. Like, that container, the moment that is created, is discoverable. They don't need to have yet another process to put catalog this or show it. It's discoverable. It has, they can immediately see the semantic of the data. They can, how it's being produced. They can immediately see how this data product is using maybe data from other sources. They can see the lineage, and there's no extra work. They just have to focus on creating that data product, which is, what is the shape of the data that I'm sharing? what are my dependencies, where are the sources, and how I'm producing that shape of the data, and what are the guarantees. Explain what are the guarantees I have around this data, how often it gets produced, and so on. All the orchestration of infrastructure, standardization of, provisioning the infrastructure, orchestrating, getting the data, running the transformation, sharing that, they all become kind of out of the box available to them. And not only that, the guarantees around the data quality, like all of that is really encoded into this concept of data as a product. And the cherry on the top is that once you have a bunch of these data products and each one of them says, hey, I want to use the data from that one and do this sort of analysis on it and produce this other set of recommendations, let's say, to downstream. The cherry on the top is that you have now the pulse, the finger on the pulse of your data management end to end. You can see the speed of creation of the data products, and you can track that is speeding up. You can see the speed of adoption and discovery. How long does it go from someone looking for something and then finding it and get access and using it? And we can guarantee that time is reduced because we've kind of automated that process. And you can see the cost of what is costing me of this particular data product is costing me a lot because it's running every second is running a heavy transformation and compute on this expensive like compute source that I have. We can share that information with them. And the beauty of it is that you can see all of that regardless of what underlying infrastructure these data products running on. You can have one data product that is completely on a different warehouse and tech stack from another data product because they're about this logical abstraction, standardization on top of your variety of tech stacks. So you don't have to re-platform yet into another centralized platform to get that. You don't have to go from warehouse to another warehouse to another lake to another lake house. You can tap into the storage and compute that you have, and this standardized kind of logical layer gives you the abilities that then you had to purpose build on each of the stack in a uniform way. So that's why I say it's a long story if I tell you all the pieces.
No, that's great, though. I think it's important to hear the pieces so you understand how it works and where it would fit in if you were, in charge of data infrastructure or leading a big enterprise company on the data side. So that's really cool. You've went out, you started the company, you've raised some capital, you've got employees, you decided to run this and build this on your own. We see a lot of co-founders and founding teams. What was it that made you decide to do it on your own as a solo founder?
A lot of solo founders. It wasn't again, it was a matter of like situation that you're in. I didn't wake up and say, I shall be the solo founder of this company. It wasn't a moment like that. It was that I was a little bit on my own. Like a lot of founders, if you see them, they were working on a product together, and then like in a company, like they were, I don't know, in Netflix building a solution there, or in LinkedIn, and they bring
Right.
that solution open sources, and then the main contributors become the founders. I wasn't in that company. I was working, with a bunch of consultants that build this concept as an idea with point solutions for other customers, that those customers of course have that implementation. So as a starting point, it was it was hard to kind of pull a team like that together. And I did go on a little adventure of finding a co-founder, especially if you're pleasing your investors. Your risk factor as a solo founder, and you get judged by the color of your hair, and the badge of consultancy was all badge of shame I was wearing. So I did go on a little adventure walkabout to find a co-founder. But it's like finding a co-founder is like finding a lifelong partner, and it's really hard to find a lifelong partner. So I looked and looked and looked, and I didn't find my lifelong partner. So I thought, and I talked to a bunch of solo founders who were in my situation, and say, well, just to start the company and then build a team, build the founding team, that they come in and they all become part of this founding team together. So that's kind of I had to move on. The time forced me to take this path, and it has worked okay so far.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I know we hear a lot about the value of having, co-founders as part of a leadership team, but there also is a lot of breakups of founders that, it was not the right one and it sets the company back and the company dissolves, doesn't go forward. And so there's, pros and cons to each, but really interested to kind of hear that from you. As you look at, 2025 approaching, what's the biggest challenge you see with either the market or your company or just in general? What keeps you up at night right now?
Um, challenge. Where should I start? Yeah, I think the in terms of every challenge is faced with an opportunity. So I think for us, there's a big opportunity, of course, ahead of us, biggest step ahead of us, which is launching the product publicly. In fact, we haven't. We have a basic website in place, but we haven't really talked about the product publicly. So announcing those and making sure we have a clear communication. So I don't have to ramble on for 45 minutes to convey the concept. It is a challenge because when you create something new that didn't exist, that you can't really point to something else and say, we're that, we're just shinier, cheaper, faster. Um, it's actually difficult to convey that, and you have to use so many analogies and different ways. So clear communication, taking the product to market, communicating the value, the messaging, all of that is an exciting opportunity, but also challenging, frankly. We have thought about and been working on opening some of these pieces to the market. Again, we're not a traditional open source, we don't have a traditional open source go to market. We're enterprise software, but we believe in some of the components must be open because interoperability is one of the values that we really care about, and decentralization we care about. And for that to be possible, you need to have you know some open. So going from a software that's been built for close use with and turning that into a few open projects, I think that would be a fun challenge ahead of us. Growing our customer base, and doing all of this in a tiny but mighty team. Yeah, so I think we have exciting milestones, and each of those will bring a challenge. And the pivot that is ahead of us is really going from uh, having proven the market fit to then growing the company. And I'm hoping that would be sometime toward the end of next year. But that pivot itself probably will reshape the DNA and would put some stresses on us, and that would be challenging and exciting all at the same time.
Yeah. As a company, there's oftentimes many breakthroughs on the technology side, but oftentimes there's breakthroughs on the leadership side too, as a founder. In your experience so far of leading and building this company, what's been a breakthrough that you can share with other founders that you've kind of gone through and you've learned, and it's really been impactful for you as a leader?
Yeah, I wish I had more to share. I think if I reflect back, I mean, founders, always surround themselves with advisors, coaches. Especially as a solo founder, it's quite lonely, and I've been blessed with amazing advisors and coaches around me, and people that have supported us within the team, outside of the company. But any breakthrough that I've had, it's been based on really trusting my gut.
Mm.
What just in my core, in my chest, in my stomach, it just felt right or felt wrong. And I encourage founders to listen to that voice and listen to that gut feel, and challenge your own assumptions, and what you've been told and the reality that have been constructed around you. We construct a reality that we live in, and that reality is based on the signals from the market, the advice we get, people inside the company. And there's an element of that which is right in your chest, middle of your chest, and how you feel in that gut feel. And I've had a couple of personal kind of aha moment and transformations in my thinking that reflected the non-company and product strategy by just listening to what just doesn't feel right to me as a person, even though what people are telling me like that's the right thing to do. And it's yeah, so I think that I wish I had more to share, but I would just say listen to your gut because you're creating the reality you live in.
Yeah, no doubt. Listen to that gut, people. I know that we do the same thing on this side. When you talk about a company, it's about innovation and marketing and, solving a problem that people are willing to pay for. It's also about the people that you bring on to build the company. And there's no technology without the people behind it. It's
Yeah.
tricky to find the right people and recruiting and assessing and making sure that everyone's aligned. And you've got a lot of big companies out there right now that are going after all the talent they can eat, really. If you think about, you get $5 billion of funding, you're a FANG company, you're in the AI space, you're on a mission to accelerate growth and hire. Every company, whether you're a startup or a medium-sized company or even large company, you have to assume your people are being messaged and text and courted. And, you know, we think that companies should be building moats, not just around their technology and their business, but around their people. And so part of that is, staying engaged with your employees, understanding that you have a path for their career, that you're giving them opportunities to grow and keeping them excited about the mission you're on. What are some of the things that you've done that has kept your company sort of aligned and focused, even though you might be small and mighty, that you're able to kind of keep the focus of the team heading in the right direction and really staying together?
Yeah. Um, I think it just starts with just hiring the right people. As you talked about, there are, mercenaries and missionaries, and a lot of mercenaries get pulled by more money, into other companies. But hiring people that just gets joy and excitement from the mission that they're on, right? They care about the mission. They are in it to make a change. Like we are here to change the trajectory of data from a centralized under a centralized control to decentralized to to create simplicity and autonomy and freedom, going back to that freedom for the individual teams. We often cater for rebels in those big organizations, rebel business units that care about autonomy and speed and freedom, but they want to play nicely with the rest of the organization. So that kind of mission, people that care about the mission and here are the for the mission is the first thing that you have to do as a leader. And I've had some missteps in terms of we've been under pressure. We needed just hands on keyboard, and we have hired mercenaries, and they haven't really lasted. They have left the company. Some of them come back to maybe do more coding, but they just haven't been a long term team member. They're just contributors, right? Um, and I think moving from there, a lot of missionaries, people like that, they get, if you go back to kind of intrinsic human needs, they get joy from seeing, from creating impact, building the product that gets used and getting that feedback. When I share this executives' feedback on the product that they're so much excited about it and they see a path they've never seen existed before, I mean, that developer that worked a few weekends and didn't sleep much, I hope that that feedback rejuvenates and give you energy to get up and do it again and again and again. So making sure that all of our engineers are in the loop and seeing the impact of their work, even though our product is, because our product is not consumer facing, is B2B, is enterprise like infrastructure. So not always engineers have kind of purview of what's actually happening in those companies as the product being used. And always, as a leader, you go through, like it's a roller coaster, right? There are days that you're down and there are days that you're up. It's like being a child again, and just experiencing those extreme emotions. But for the people, I mean, you can be vulnerable, and I encourage people to be vulnerable and real, but that uncompromisable belief in the mission of the company that no matter what, we get up and we do it again. We either burn this to the ground and get to this mission, or there is no middle path, right? Or we quit, or we fly high, right? That just drive that you have to get up in the morning and bring the team together, and that unconditional belief has to be there. You can't show a moment of doubt,
Yeah.
even for yourself. Like if you have doubts, you have to address it. So I don't know. I don't know if I came up with many good tacticals. I'm just not a good manager, to be honest. My engineering manager should have answered your question because he's an amazing, amazing York shot. He's an amazing people person, to encourage and nurture careers. And I'm definitely not that person. I'm more of a visionary, influencer type leader. So
Yeah.
we collaborate on that one.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, it's not always about you having to do it all. It's about bringing the right people on the team that can actually know the lane they're in and accelerate the company. So I think it's great. I know that there's so many different opinions we're hearing right now on the people side. We're in the business of helping companies grow and scale, and we see
Yeah.
every day where companies, have hired a number of individuals and 6 months later, they're saying, "Hey, we need to add more people because these people left," or they got double the salary, and it's crazy numbers are being thrown out there. So there's a lot of risks that are out there, and I think the better the mission that you have that people can believe in, it's the intangible things that keep people together. I think if there's a clear path, clear message, and they understand they're part of that journey and can contribute, but also be part of the success. So
Yeah, and I
really,
think,
really excited. Yeah.
sorry to interrupt there, but I think that the art of what you are doing in your company is that perfect matchmaking between what the company offers or can offer and what the employee wants. I would encourage like founders, and I'm sure it's been your experience, is that I don't think we can buy early stage can buy people with money. Like people that actually really care about the dollar amount, they're always going to be distracted and taken away because you will never ever with immediate like dollar amount kind of satisfy that. And the people that are okay to postpone that reward for something bigger, better, but a little bit down the track, and they believe in the mission, and I'm sure that's part of the kind of the secret sauce of your matchmaking.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just understanding the story of what the company is doing and the founders, and really, can we believe and have the passion they have? Because when we talk to company people, it's really about sharing that belief and also having the passion and energy that can get them excited to get to the table. And when it works out, you can kind of feel it. Like you talked about the gut feel that you just kind of know when you know, and you're like, okay, this is going to be a great fit. And most of the time, it is very well a good fit. But it's challenging, I think, for every company. You usually have like the approach that we see most companies, and we work with a lot of Y Combinator companies and Techstar. Usually, you start off and you use your own network, which we prefer and think is the right approach. You go out, you build your founding team the best you can, and at some point hopefully you don't lose people, but when you do, you have a backup, you have a plan B of, okay, I can continue to recruit on my own, but I'm going to need more support. And that's really when you want to look at what are the teams or companies that can help you grow, whether the recruitment firms or consulting firms, whoever can help you, and just make sure they're using your time well and sending what you want to them. But I think what a lot of founders of startups don't know is that you can have a plan B in place. You can sign up with companies that you have already had conversations and vetted through a recruitment firm, for example. And just because you sign up for them doesn't mean you have to start using them, but at least you can vet it out, get the paperwork in place. When you're ready in 6 to 12 months, then you at least know where to go versus you're on your heels, you just lost a person or two, you need to hire someone. Now I got to find out who am I going to use to help me, and are they good? Are they going to save my time, waste my time? And you're already kind of elonging the process. So if I was a startup founder, that's what I would do, just knowing what I see on this side, because it's always we're getting called in at the 11th hour saying we need help like now.
Yeah,
versus,
absolutely.
e-
We have had even from the early days, because I was a solo founder, and I had to quickly put a team together. We used and worked with firms like yours from the beginning, and very quickly realized like the good ones and not the ones that really matched us, because the firms that work with early stage are very different from firms that are scaling, and some do all. But that, yeah, I agree with you that working with firms that understand early stage and the dynamics, the physics of building the founding team or the extension of a founding team, they can be extremely, extremely helpful.
yeah. Well, as you look into 2025, it looks like you have a lot to be excited about. I'm excited to see how things go and what happens in the next 6, 12, 18 months from now. If anybody wants to find you or find Next Data, where do they go?
Sure. I think nextdata.com, our website, is a bit, I guess, anemic in terms of information that we put out. There's a POV section that you can get a glimpse of what we're working on. But yeah, the nextdata.com, there's an early access, there's get in contact or hello@nextdata.com. I still pick up the phone or answer the mail on
Of course.
hello@nextdata.com myself.
Yeah.
So those are the two places, and I'm also on LinkedIn. That they can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time and having the courage to tell your story, really from the beginning to where you're at today. And for all the listeners for listening, it means a lot to me. You spent your time with us. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now. But can't wait to catch up with you all in the next episode. Until then, Zhamak, the world. Take care. If you like what we're doing, don't forget to subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Follow us on YouTube, where we go behind the scenes to learn what it takes to be a startup founder.